I'm doing fine. So leave me alone, so leave me alone, so leave me alone. I'm doing fine. So leave me alone, so leave me alone, so leave me alone. I'm doing fine. So leave me alone, so leave me alone, so leave me alone. I'm doing fine. So leave me alone, so leave me alone, so leave me alone, leave me alone.
The Great Groovy Ghoulies. I don't know if you knew that that was the band that does the theme song for our opening, and they didn't write it for our show. We just took it and have not played any licensing fees yet. But we'd like for them to notice, because I'd certainly share some of the massive cash we're making with Anarchist Jurisdiction. The name of this show, and I am one of the hosts, Zach Burns. Terry Holloman will be along in a second. We were about to go on, and then his laptop did one of those forced updates. So he's giving me real-time percentages as to how far along that's going. But in the meantime, I did want to start off the show tonight's episode is called Complicated People, because we're going to talk about Tiger Woods, just as we spoke about Rush Limbaugh in the past episode 35. All of these, of course, available anywhere that you can find podcasts, and we please encourage you to download them. We're getting some good traction, but every download counts. So I have discovered with my girlfriend this brand of alcoholic beer called Athletic Brewing Company. And it is really, really good. And I'm doing this live read in the hopes that maybe I could send it to them. So hopefully it's a good one. And then maybe they'll give us some cash. Tonight's non-alcoholic brew, it's a non-alcoholic, we'll just say NA from now on. NA Light Copper. It's called Cerveza Atletica. And this is the best non-alcoholic beer I've ever had. Now, I used to be an alcoholic. I know that there's some people that tell you that you're always supposed to identify as an alcoholic. Well, I'm not right now because I'm not abusing alcohol. I'm not going to meetings. I'm just not drinking. And I know at those meetings, sometimes they tell you you shouldn't even drink non-alcoholic beer. I reject all that. What I do accept, what I do welcome to my family is Upside Down's or Athletic Brewing's Cerveza Atletica. It's good. So there we go. The first live read of Anarchist Jurisdiction. Last week, we spoke about someone who was, let's face it, if we're going to call people gods in the industry of broadcasting, Rush Limbaugh was a god. And Terry and I tried to make sense of his legacy and how we should talk about his death. He died last week at the age of 70 from lung cancer. And predictably, there was, especially now with Twitter, there were people celebrating it, and then there were people who were castigating the people who were celebrating it, saying, look what bad people you are. You're supposed to be a nice person. And Terry and I thought that there was something in the middle that could happen. And what we thought was appropriate was you can trash a lot of the things, which we did, that he did while he was alive, while still understanding that there were people who were very sad tonight at his death. And that's why things get complicated. Complicated as a laptop update, which is apparently over with, thankfully. I understand that, Terry. Fully understand that.
Dude.
At the worst times.
The worst.
But, we just did our first live read for a non-alcoholic beer that I'm quite enjoying.
Oh my gosh, what is it?
It's called it's Athletic Brewing Company's Cerveza Atletica. And if you're still into the ritual of having a drink at night, but also realize maybe in the past year you formulated some sort of addiction and kind of forget your kids are around or are waking up every day more and more in a fog, or some of your relationships have now become tattered. Well, then let me recommend this Cerveza Atletica.
Oh,
good evening, Terry Holloman.
Hey, what's up, Zach? How you doing, man?
Sorry, so tonight's show, no worries. Tonight's show is called Complicated People. And today's complicated person, last week's was Rush Limbaugh, which I thought was interesting, the way that you and I kind of delved into why he should neither be, his death nor life should really be particularly celebrated. Today's is Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods got into a massive accident And it's the second big traffic incident, and it's not the only thing that we know Tiger Woods for. Obviously, we know him as a heroic golfer who won the Masters really recently, 2 years ago, and was on path to be the greatest of all time, who was on path to be, in his sport, special. I mean, is still special, but like special in a category of his own. And then, of course, the news broke that he had cheated on his wife with literally every woman in the South Florida area. And I find it really interesting, Terry. This is why I find these sort of conversations interesting. The last time that I really went to church in a meaningful way, the sermon was, what do we do with someone like Michael Jackson, who had just died and still is a figure that a lot of us, so we'll start with him before we get to Tiger.
Another complex person.
Incredibly complex person, because even if you choose to believe he didn't do anything to any of those children, you have to admit he was difficult to root for in a lot of aspects of his life. You know, dangling a child over a balcony is something nobody wants to see their hero do. But I've yet to meet anybody, and I've seen people say I'll never listen to whatever song again.
Mm-hmm.
But I've yet to meet anybody who will cut Michael Jackson's music out of his life. So the sermon essentially was, what do you do with someone who has brought joy to millions, but also pain to many, potentially pain to as many, not millions, but pain to many people as well. And I thought it was a really fascinating, and he was speaking at it from, like, you know, a theological, religious standpoint, like, what would God do with someone like this? But, you know, kind of throws it out to the audience, like, his legacy as a complicated person. How do you treat that? So I want to ask you, Terry Holloman, when's the last time a Michael Jackson song came up in your playlist, and how did you feel about it?
Shit, yesterday, and I jammed it like 4 Michael Jackson tracks in a row. Actually, I was listening to satellite radio, and they were doing a tribute to Michael Jackson and Prince. And so they played like a medley of Michael Jackson and Prince songs. And surprisingly enough, I was like jamming in the car like I had just heard them songs for the first time. Right. I was born and raised on Michael Jackson music, and Prince for that matter. Both another complicated person, Prince. But speaking of Michael Jackson, you know, he had some accusations lobbied against him while he was alive. None of them bore any fruit. He was never
not criminally.
He was never criminally charged. We think he made some settlements, right? I mean, I don't think anything has been verified as far as amounts and whatnot, but I think we're pretty confident that some people got paid. I never saw the documentary that came out a couple of years ago with the young people who said that, you know, he had touched them inappropriately. I will say this about Michael Jackson. So this is just the way I choose to think about Michael. I believe that he was a flawed human being. I think there's a reason why he was flawed. He was damaged. He was made to, you know, carry the weight of an entire entertainment family since he was like 6 years old, 7 years old, however old he was, when he became part of the Jackson 5 and was the lead guy. There's a lot of pressure to carry. I think he was never given, and again, this is not giving him an excuse. This is just the way I feel about Michael Jackson. I think he was never given an opportunity to not only just grow up, but I don't think he was ever given an opportunity to live a normal life. I don't think he's ever known what normal is, what you and I, or, you know, the 99% of us out there know as normal. Like, you know, getting up and going through a day-to-day, you know, routine, working a 9 to 5, maybe going to high school, maybe having a regular girlfriend, doing regular things, and going, because you can't, if you're Michael Jackson.
Yes. I think what Terry was getting into in his laptop update failed him. But yeah, some people feel stardom, or bring it back on, Terry. Some people are child stars, right? And then fade into anonymity. And this is like the entire cast of Different Strokes, right? And it turned out pretty badly for all of them. All of them. Gary Coleman probably fared the best, and he did not fare well.
Yes.
But Michael Jackson went from child star, and this is rare in the world of pop, to somehow an even more famous adult star. So he never, since the age of 5, which is when I think he actually, became a star with the Jackson 5. He never could go anywhere for his entire life without being the person who was there, including like Rome, including like the Vatican. If he visited there, he was still the news over the Pope. And then beyond that, that still wasn't enough for his abusive father, who wasn't only abusive to him, but was mostly abusive to him. And these are some of the things that were brought up in the sermon that I went to. And it's like when you take away someone's childhood, when you take away someone's idea of innocence, can you then excuse them later for doing whatever it takes to try to scramble back into that innocence? And that was sort of the point of it. And while doing so, selling hundreds of millions of records and becoming synonymous with pop and synonymous with Halloween. Like he owns one of the holidays, if not two. Like Jackson's 5 have some amazing Christmas song, and just a lot of our live soundtracks. Like everyone knows at least 10 Michael Jackson songs by heart.
Yeah.
So he brought us so much joy, but then also potentially is this massively flawed person. And I did watch the 6-part documentary on him, and it seems like he also maybe brought a lot of pain to people. And this is kind of the gray that I think is missing from when we talk a lot about of what are now or going to soon become historical figures. Like Michael Jackson is kind of a historical figure. Do you like Michael Jackson? That's the basic question. Do you still like Michael Jackson? And obviously your answer is yes. And my answer is yes as well.
Yeah, I do. I mean, like I said, he's been his music and just him as an entertainer in general has been a part of my entire life. And I know, like I said, I know he's a flawed human being, but there's something that goes along with, being that level of celebrity that brings along a lot of scrutiny, a lot of hanger-ons, a lot of people who become litigious, and some of it is frivolous. And I mean, you look at, people who get sued for a lot of things out there, and they end up just settling out of court. And you could lob accusations at some of these guys or girls or whoever it may be, and rather than go through the whole process, I'll settle out of court for a few $100,000. And I'm not saying that's the case, but all I'm saying is we're in a situation where he's never been found guilty of anything. And I know that's really a ridiculously high bar to set, but I find that there's always, there's this person's story and this person's story, and then there's what lies in the middle, which is usually the truth. And I'm sure, yeah.
It's funny how you feel about him. And his career often goes into how much you forgive him, which is the case, because everybody loved Michael Jackson. It was hard to find somebody who didn't at least dig a couple of his tunes, right? So it took a long time for people to eat. And let's lump Bill Cosby into this for a little while.
I was about to throw a couple in there at you.
Who didn't like Bill Cosby growing up? Like, the Cosby Show was magical to all of us, and it was important. And then it took, everyone acts like the day of his trial was the first time anyone heard that he had done something like he had done, even though it had been rumor for a long time. Rumor confirmed by a bunch of different women, like known shit. And then finally Hannibal Buress does that bit, and people start really looking into it. And eventually so many women start coming forward, like upwards of 48, I think. But still, even then, it took people, after these charges were levied, Bill Cosby was still out there doing shows. And I had heard rumors of this kind of stuff when I saw him back in 2008 in Red Bank, New Jersey, and thought, there's no way. There's no way. However, if that had been someone I don't like from the world of comedy or someone I don't like from the world of pop music, let's say it had been, Larry the Cable Guy, there's no way I wouldn't have immediately jumped off or immediately criticized other people for going to see him. And that's that kind of reflects on us too as people, is that we're complicated as well in how we judge who should be cast out and who should remain, important in whatever it is that they do.
I think a lot of us too do a decent job of compartmentalizing things. Like some people are able to separate the two: the actor, the entertainer, the comedian, the guy who was America's dad, somebody who who grew up in that era as young people looked up to, and like, man, I wish my dad was that cool, funny, and felt like we were a Cosby, no matter what demographic we came from. And we put that over here, and we could put him and his sexual allegations and his conviction and his, all of his nefarious deeds and his rape in a different category, and say, I'll turn on over here, I'll watch the Cosby Show over here, but I have a strong distaste and I hate this man on the other end for this, because that's essentially, and I'm just talking, I'm thinking about what people out there are just thinking about, not just me in general, because I'm probably a little bit different, but I'm thinking a lot of people are like, if I cancel all Bill Cosby rather than put different compartments, I'm canceling on my childhood. I'm canceling some of the best parts of my childhood. And how do you do that? Like, it's really like, I can visualize like when the first episode of The Cosbys came on and how it enthralled the entire world, and how the entire world was on pins and needles until Thursday night. And we watched the Cosby Show. And then to just eradicate all that from your history might be hard for a lot of people.
It's hard. It's hard for a number of things that we grew up watching that now people just think that you should just immediately eradicate from your life. The Dukes of Hazzard, I think, is an example. Without a doubt,
like for me as a black kid, dude, I used to love the Dukes of Hazzard, man. I did, and I kind of knew, but I didn't really know because I was a kid what the flag was all about. But I was the kid that was like, with your friends, and you'd be like, okay, which car are you driving today? I'm driving Knight Rider. Oh, okay, I'm driving General Lee. And I would dive in my mom's windows in the car, like,
yes.
And now I can't watch it anymore. I can't. Yeah. It doesn't even come on, right? So it's tough, right?
I don't know if it would hold up well for me to be interested in, but I'm sad that I don't have the opportunity to inspect it for myself. I guess I could buy the DVDs and everything like that. But
did you watch when it was on?
One of my best friend's names was Dukes. His real name was David, but he was known as Dukes. Never did I connect it with any sort of Confederacy, Proud Boy, Charlottesville shit that ever happened. It was just some good old boys. And it's not like, and they were never like, oh, let's go shut down that black general store.
They never did. They never heard any black people on that show. I don't think they had any black people ever on the show. Like maybe
I don't remember any.
Like maybe a wayward hitchhiker or something. I don't know. Like there was never any black people to burn a cross in front of their house. But
but we are in the world. Yeah, we're in the world of pop culture. Not that these things have been taken away. I do think the cancel culture narrative gets a little bit lazy, but it is let's contextualize things. And that's sort of what's infuriating to me, is that we will bend over backwards to support someone like Tiger Woods, who I honestly believe, if you compare him to other people who have done similar things, doesn't deserve the support he's getting. I support him because I support those other people, but it's like this dude could have killed somebody twice now. He cheated on his wife, over and over and over again. This wasn't just he fell in love with another woman. This was he was in a Perkins in Jacksonville at 2:30 a.m. and ended up having sex with that waitress. Like he was just, and then almost immediately he does this Nike commercial where he's like, I regret this, which he only regretted because 16 women came forward. And then for a split second, maybe, America was like, should we root for this guy? And everybody was like, yes, we should. And I don't get why he gets to retain, even after an instance, and we don't know all the details. So far, it hasn't been shown that he's impaired or anything like that. But there are more details coming out.
Yeah.
But why is it that he remains on this heroic pedestal? And then other people who've done far less worse to society, whose art or sports dominance you also appreciate, they all of a sudden they're just bad guys for life. They're bad people for life. And again, it's because it's complicated. And I wish people would realize that. You probably root for someone else considers a villain.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the case of Tiger Woods, there's a couple of things going on there. The first and foremost is that he is a really, really, really good golfer. And I think, sometimes when you are really good at something, or you're in the limelight, or you have a lot of money, or you have a lot of power, people tend to overlook a lot of things. And I mean, we don't have to look any further than just our politics, our government leaders. You look at those guys and they're always in some mess, and really nothing ever happens because of it. They're accused of all kinds of sordid activities and nothing really ever happens. And I think a lot of people look at Tiger and they think, okay, he's an elite athlete. He's been elite for a very long time, and he's very powerful, very wealthy. And, we've loved him for so long, watching what he does. So we kind of give him a pass. I think sometimes also we look at, the scenario and say, is what he did really that bad? And I think some people, weigh it on one hand. It was like, does what he did, does that affect me? Does that on my moral compass anywhere? Like the fact that he does what he does with his personal life, and it's not affecting anybody. It's not breaking any laws. It's not, he's not out there, cussing on TV, doing heroin and crack and doing some, like, whatever it might be, prostitutes. And he maybe he does. I mean, but his image is pretty clean, outside of the fact that he was a serial adulterer and he's crashed a couple cars.
Yes, he's wrecked a couple vehicles. Under the influence, certainly in one. And then, but there's some people like that we root for. John Mulaney last year during Christmas, very famous comedian, announced that he was going to rehab. And I think that's always great. But then there were less famous comedians who were like, I've been to rehab 4 times. No one gives it. Like slightly less famous comedians were like, I've been to rehab 4 times. No one gives a shit whether I get in, stay in, come out. It's just, it's interesting and varied who we decide to root for and who we don't. And again, realize that just because you're passionate and a fan of someone doesn't mean that it's for somebody else who isn't to feel like that maybe they deserve more of a punishment. And then vice versa. Just because you feel like someone deserves more of a punishment doesn't mean that somebody else isn't realistic in saying this person means a lot to society and maybe we should overlook some of their foibles, as they say. And I guess that's what I'm bringing up with complicated people. It's like I was reading a story where a school named after Ben Franklin was just going to have its name changed because Ben Franklin did, let's face it, some nefarious shit.
Yeah. And
it's like, well, we're going to put current day people that we like potentially in context, but we're never going to, when everybody involved was dead, then it's a lot easier just to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's sort of frustrating to me.
I mean, but look at Christopher Columbus. We pretty much canceled Columbus, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think, I mean, we might be getting a little off track here, but since you did bring up Ben Franklin, why not bring up Christopher Columbus, right? As somebody who was, learned history in the American school system, I was taught one particular thing about Christopher Columbus. He discovered America.
Literally America.
Mayflower, Santa Maria, and whatever, the P boat. But anyway, they came over here to discover
you just
America.
won. Terry, you just got a D.
Well,
even in 5th grade.
Well, I lived in Canada. Blame it on Canada.
But we were taught wrong stuff about him. And he never landed on the lower 48. Never landed on the lower 48. And then committed mass genocide wherever he did land, which was left out. It was just always in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And you're like, what a brave person. And then somehow he went from Spanish to Italian, which is another weird thing. But what I never understand is why wouldn't any fucking person want an extra day off? Like,
they're cool with it. They just don't like the name, the person that it's, we're celebrating that day.
That's understanding, and that is putting stuff into context. Actually, I think there's a smartness to that. Columbus came to nowhere that you and I at all recognize at home, and the places that he did land, he did a lot of damage to, and then we weren't taught that. He's like the OxyContin of like historical figures. We were just lied to about him for a while, and he seemed great until we started discovering the truths, and all of a sudden, like, Purdue Pharmaceutical needs to become like Brown and Indigenous Pharmaceutical.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of the same, right? Complex character.
Complex character, but and someone that I cried over when they killed themselves when I was in high school, Kurt Cobain. If we're going to just talk about a bunch of complicated people, Kurt Cobain was my idol, because angst is so undefined, right? You don't know why you're upset when you're a teenager, and Kurt Cobain fully seemed to understand that as someone, in their young 20s, mid 20s, and then almost late 20s before he killed himself. It's like the lyrics he sang were nonsensical for the most part. I mean, he would have a liner here that would make sense. Give me a Leonard Cohen afterworld so I can sigh eternally is brilliant. But it Smells Like Teen Spirit is named after fucking deodorant.
Right.
But you still felt the rage of that song, right? And then he brought me to another place. But lately, somewhat recently, I've been reading articles, interviewing his daughter that he left behind, Frances Bean. She's not a fan because he robbed her of a father, of a life that she could have had. And it's like, oh God, that was a real punch in the nose, because this was a guy that I built nearly a shrine to, that I tried to buy every piece of music he ever wrote. And after watching some of the documentaries about him where he's very, very high, giving his daughter a haircut, putting her in a very dangerous situation. It's like, oh my God, this is a person that I'm going to, and whose love that I had, who I'm going to grapple with for the rest of my life, I think now.
Yeah. Well, think about this. I want everybody that's out there listening and watching, I want you to think about this. There was a line by one of my favorite rap groups, and for sure one of my favorite rappers, and that's where I get all my philosophical ideas, is from gangster rap songs. But outside of that, no, from Outkast, Andre 3000, he said, all of my heroes did dope. Now, I really want you to think about that. I mean, it's kind of off the cuff lyric, but think about it. Mm-hmm. Try to think of someone you knew who was a huge mega star, whether it be in the world of rock, pop, hip hop, movies, whatever it may be, who didn't have a serious addiction or flaw. Mm-hmm. And somebody who was really good at their craft. And you think about it, and people who were great and who were geniuses all had them, from the Jimi Hendrixes to Morrison to you name it, Elvis Presley. They've all had serious addictions, and they were complicated people.
Terry, I started doing drugs because my heroes did drugs, and then didn't speak of them. And then I think the brilliance of them is that, and the reason they resonated with me, and the reason that dare programs and shit fail, when you have someone coming out like in a puppy costume being like, drugs are bad, versus the literature that you can read by, you know, authors that I was reading at the time, William S. Burroughs, Hubert Selby Jr., all these fucking people who you should outgrow. But at the time really resonate with you. And they tell you like the accurate way that these drugs make you feel. And it sounds kind of great. But you bring up Hendrix, you bring up Morrison. Would they have been great without the drugs is kind of the question now that you have. Like, would Kurt Cobain without heroin? And I had the chance to see him in 1993. I went with my friend Josh Brower. He just actually sent me a picture of the concert ticket. We saw him with like 5,000. We saw Nirvana in front of like 5,000 people. It was amazing.
Wow.
And when I think about it, he did 2.5 hours of rocking Nirvana tunes and did all that on heroin. And it was amazing. Could he have done that so much better, sober? And probably yes. Almost certainly.
It's in there. The talent's in there.
The talent's in there, and it's just it's a reason that I drank for so long is that I didn't think that I could summon creativity because so many literature is my main passion, music being my second. Name an author that you don't know is a drunk. You know, the great ones. You know, you have Fitzgerald, you have Hemingway, Roth, who ended up becoming, my God, was much less of a drunk. And I started becoming more of an inspiration to me because he didn't rely on alcohol. But you think of them and they're boozy, you know, heroin-addled, coke-addled brilliance. And you think that that's the only way that genius can be created. And it's like, it results in someone like Amy Winehouse, who eventually, because Hemingway never said like, try to get me stop drinking. I said, no. Amy Winehouse was like, no. This is the only way that I can be who I am. And in this instance, in some of these instances, if we're going to talk about the complicated people who have substance abuse problems, it's kind of, we as the audience have to take a little bit of the blame. Because that Amy Winehouse song was huge, still is huge. Still people sing along to it, knowing that she's dead because of the content, the theology she had behind that song. And in that instance, like, I remember the first time that I learned that Kurt Cobain was on heroin. I was like, that just must be something that he needs to make him a genius. And if that's the reason that In Utero was as great as it was, and that if that's what needs to make him as great as he is for his next record, then that's what he has to do. Yeah. And we're not. I don't remember there being a big concern for really any of these people, these rock stars, these titans of literature, these movie stars, these athletes, even, for them to like stop what they're doing, because let's now turn it into the world of sports. How, as Americans, did we ignore the fact that the average size of a Major League Baseball player's neck went from 36 inches to 74 inches? That Brady Anderson hit 49 home runs and then never hit like more than 11. And we were just like, yeah, but it's entertaining. Let's not look too far into it.
Watching Barry Bonds and McGuire go at it.
Right.
Those guys used to just bang the ball out of the park. And, we pretty much know, the size of Barry Bonds' head is this big now.
Yeah.
So we are somewhat to blame, and that's kind of that's where I was kind of getting at it with it, comparing these people who were addicts and involved in illicit drugs or were alcoholics or doing steroids, and comparing those people to the likes of the Michael Jacksons of the world, who were kind of quirky. We'll say that.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Potentially.
And allegedly, and the Tiger Woods of the world. I mean, I think you can draw a line and connect them all.
Can we just accept then that everybody has something horrendously shitty about them. And if they don't, they're probably not that interesting. And we're probably not paying that close of attention to them. Like, honestly, name the best person in your life and then defend their life as a biopic.
It doesn't, yeah. That's the truth though. I think that's the problem. We as consumers of entertainment or whatever it might be, television, movies, music, books, sports, we get to be kind of judgy. We get to judge other people on a large scale, whereas we don't want to turn that microscope on ourselves. And I think if we look at each one of ourselves, I think in detail the way that we look at celebrities, entertainers, athletes, who's better? They're just on a different scale. They're just on a different level of it.
Well, imagine, it just seems like such an unfair responsibility that we're putting on them. Yeah. Yeah, because you have, how many people do I have over the course of a day judging me and my behavior? Maybe 15. And then you become times that by a million. And of course, somebody's going to be able to find some sort of fault with you.
Yeah. I think about that all the time, man. Like when I think about it all the time.
And we're having,
like doing
it seems like we got it worked out. And that's, I guess, necessarily all over Twitter. But it is frustrating to me that you will apply like the messiness of things.
I think I'm lagging, Zach. I'm lagging a little bit, but that's cool. I'm back in now.
Basically,
yeah, I'm lagging.
Okay, yeah,
that's what I do. Good. I lag.
It's live.
Okay,
we'll fix this maybe in the podcast, right? But yeah, so what I wanted to get into just with complicated people was I've become, I guess, more for just about everybody. And I think our conversations with Amanda Knox always helps me with this, where God, has anyone that we know personally been more judged than she has? Like just viciously judged. And still she has to persevere. And I think that she's won some people over. But every time we post an interview with her, like the first comment is, oh, so you have murderers on your show now? And to have to live with that sort of thing. And she's into the sort of the complex nature of how we are as people. And I find that really refreshing, oddly, where there's so many fucking fake Puritans that I see out there who have jobs to comment on things, who are willing to just immediately, and again, I don't want to use the word cancel culture because I think it's overall kind of a lazy term, but who just want to denigrate anybody's life achievements because of perceived mishap that they've had, or just are refuse to admit you don't like that person's movies, you're not a golf fan, you don't like that person's politics, or you don't like that person's music, so you're preordained to dislike them anyway. So you're going to be a lot harder on them than some of the shit you like. Like Dr. Dre should have, like, by a lot of standards, should have been canceled forever ago. But like he is God amongst hip hop. He's a god amongst music moguls. He's he was absolutely abusive towards women. Did a lot of the criminal shit aside. But people like his music, so they're like, oh, but that was just Dre's past life. But if you dragged out something from someone that you didn't like, the singer of Foghat or whoever it is, that they did in 1978, it's like, well, then that person we can justifiably attack because clearly that's who they were in that moment and that's who they are now.
Yeah, it's the case with everything in life though, right? Like my bad guy is not as bad as your bad guy, right? Like the bad guy that I like is cool as he's on my team. But now, if you got the same kind of bad guy on your team, then he's the scourge of the earth. We got to cancel that guy. The problem I have with this so-called quote unquote cancel culture, Zach, is that there's really sometimes there's not a lot of nuance to it. You know what I'm saying? Like there's not a lot of there's like zero nuance to it. Like and it goes back that you kind of touched on it a little bit, and it goes back to like this old saying that I used to hear all the time about how a reputation, it takes a lifetime to build it, and it takes like a second to destroy it, and then once it's gone, you probably never get it back again, right? I think it's kind of unfair a lot of time, especially when we talk about this cancel culture. You talk about people who have, maybe had a slip up, maybe had a faux pas, maybe did something that they weren't supposed to do and apologize for it. I mean, and
well, here's what I would say to anybody who wants to, participate in this cancel culture. Give me your passwords. Let me look into your social media. Give me your phone password and see how comfortable you are fucking with that. And this was and I wish I had just done this because as the audience knows, I worked at NPR for a while, and I would love to do this reverse cancel culture on the motherfuckers there. And believe me, I'm never going back to that shithole that is NPR. Sorry if you have any more guest bookings for All Things Considered, the laziest fucking news show I've ever heard. But these people talk shit and say horrible, horrible, horrible personal things but they do it via Slack or whatever, and they would never be able to own up to the horrendous things that they say in private. So of course, they're never going to have to. They're because NPR is such a groupthink environment. They're never going to have to. But honestly, if you are a young person right now getting into broadcasting, please try to get an internship or some shit at KUOW or whatever your local NPR affiliate is, and start taking screenshots of the shit that these people are talking about each other and talking about overall incredibly kind people and each one another saying horrible things. And I swear you could get half that staff canceled in a second. Like it would not take long for them to feel the same wrath that I feel like, NPR inspires this sort of ilk of people who consume media and who believe that there is only one way to perceive a person's worth, and then violate that perception on a daily basis. Now, I took great joy in it. I thought it was hysterical, but their solemnity becomes a whole different world because they think that what they're doing is righteous and true, and there's only one way to present a piece of information. And then, meanwhile, in the background, they're absolutely fucking trashing the people who are presenting that information. And I know that, like, that truth is never going to come out because there are very few people like me who will ever be hired at NPR again, and nobody would believe me anyway. The only person that believes me is, me and my immediate family. Yeah, and Terry. Yeah. But I swear to God it happened. And they pretend that there is only one right and one wrong. And then I look at the way that they behave. And man, do they add layers of complexity that they don't even realize and would never even admit to. They think that what they're doing is 100% pure when it is anything but. Essentially, they believe themselves almost to be a church. And churches, any church, has all sort of conflicting, disgusting truth versus, utopia type, conflicts. And man, does NPR absolutely have that tenfold. It's gross.
I got a question for you, Zach, and it's gonna get kind of deep, man. This is like a completely this is like the age-old question, existential question, or whatever you want to call it question. And it stems from some of the stuff I was listening to you say. And I guess if you know the answer to it, you might as well be like the new leader of the free world, man. So are we a lost cause? Are we a lost cause? And I'll explain what I mean by that. Like, just the cynical nature of people in today's society, where are people genuinely trusting of other people? Do they genuinely like other people? Do they genuinely want other people to succeed? Like is it still a matter of live and let live as a philosophy for us, especially here in America, where, okay, I believe this and it's cool and I support you. You do your thing. I'm not going to do no harm. I'm not going to cause you any harm. You don't cause me any harm. And we could just skip down the road, picking daisies. Are we a lost cause? Is that ever going to be our reality?
That's a really good question. I refuse to believe anything is a lost cause. But I remember when back in 2008 when SB 1070 was happening, which was this really horrendous anti-immigration bill coming out of the state of Arizona. And I was living in Utah at the time, and there were a lot of similar bills proposed, where all they wanted to do was, deport the illegals. And one of the problems is that everybody was looking at this group of undocumented immigrants. I don't like the word. I hate word censorship, but illegals is such a shitty word.
Yeah, it is.
As just this group of just job taking, gang joining, drug dealing. But then what we were trying to do at the radio show I was working on at the same time was like, yeah, but if you just broke it down to the one person who might live on your block, who came here without the proper paperwork for a better life, like if you could just meet them face to face, they'd be far less easy to hate, and it would be far less easy to vote for a piece of legislation like that. When you can see like the legislation only works if all of you are grouped into that horrendous group of gang rapists and stuff like that. But when you realize that there are people here who came here just because they were so desperate to make a better life that this was their only choice, and that's sort of the same thing, I think, with the question that you were asking. Are we a lost cause? Only if we stop, only if we continue speaking about one another as, those monoliths, which nobody likes being spoken about in that fashion. No one likes like, oh, well, and this happened with forever. Like, well, typical black male type thing, typical white. Like, why does someone who think that they're injecting intelligent thought into anything start any argument with that, or use the behavior of one to then, cast a shadow over the behavior of an entire group of people? That's just so, and unfortunately, that's so accepted. And I get shit on as a white male all the time for things that I think are hilarious. Whatever, do it. But I don't really respect you as, an intellectual when you do that. Like, it's such an easy applause line. It's basically like coming out, like, what your first thing is like, well, as a comedian, like, celebrating 180 days sober today. Like, that's an applause line. He's not going to do it. Like, and so now you're just saying like, and let's bring up local Seattle journalist, Erica Barnett. She always does this, like, oh, wow, the white males are really coming after me today. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. They're so terrible. Well, a lot of us are just like, I'll agree. I mean, but no one's coming after you. And it's just your lazy, default applause line for something like that. And the only reason people can get away with doing that is because you're doing it without like actually interacting with specific members of a community. You're just saying it on Twitter, or you're saying it on a show like this, or whatever. And then, most people are going to support you, and then you're going to mute the people who don't. And that's great. So you're just getting all your beliefs confirmed, and you're becoming less complicated. And who wants to be that? Like, I enjoy being a complicated person. I change my mind on the show, like, minute to minute sometimes. And I think that's great. Like, if you're still like, man, I am me at 25, and you're 46, what's wrong with you? What have you done? I mean, musically, I am. Shout out to Mr. T Experience. But like, other than that, you should grow daily. There should be new things. Like if you're upset about something that happened yesterday and then not upset about it, or, you know, the other way around, that's great. That's the way it should be. That's what you're asking other fucking people to do. And then you're not doing it yourself. Like that's just, it's really maddening. So again, like I always like to tread this line. Like I'm not in the camp of like, oh man, it's hard being a white male. It's not. But it's boring to hear your attacks because I know you're an amazingly smart person who could be doing something much more interesting with them. And just because, and then you see who attacks like that screenshot, and it's like the picture of a bloody snake, and the avatar is, and then the actual username is like Fart Puncher 83. And it's like, well, we don't even know as a white male. Most likely is. I will say that. But it's like, what you're not, are you really like furthering your cause, or making something that someone will read 100 years from now? Or are you just appeasing it's always between like 10 and 17,000 followers that you have on Twitter and your 83 Patreons, which is 80 more than we have right now, but still. But like, I don't do this.
Like sometimes, like, is it, I'm trying to, appease my followers, or sometimes could it be like maybe somebody's genuinely hurt and they're looking to lash out, and this is the way they lash
fine out. I think that's great. I think lashing out is totally understandable, but don't then turn it into something that is now truth because of this incident. I think that's the sort of the difference.
This fits every category and every situation type of thing.
Dude, and I think you can tell the difference too between someone who's like really upset and someone who's just like, I got 1,200 words to fill. I know who my audience is, and I know who the best people to go after are. I think that it's pretty recognizable who's trying to actually further discourse, and who's just writing a really lazy slate piece. Like I think that most reasonable people could tell the difference. Yeah. Well, I would hope so.
Yeah, hopefully. But then you never know. The road that we're going down these days, with the social media, and then with really not that much personal interaction anymore, you never know where it's going to go, Zach.
But maybe by August, it'll be like, no one gives a shit about whether you use pronouns and whether you don't. No one cares about. There'll be all these things that when you isolate someone from just regular everyday interaction. Because think about, like, how was your day? What do you usually answer? Oh, I was at the hardware store and they were out of this, and we've been deprived of all that. So now it's like, how was your day? It's like, you would not fucking believe what I read on Twitter today.
That's about it.
So now it's like, instead of these banal stories that happen in the real world, which aren't good stories, like there's never been a good interesting response to how was your day? Because you would have heard about it earlier.
I would have gave you the good news.
Yeah, or bad news.
Yeah.
But it just like there's no good response to, like, how was your day if what you're going to respond to is something that you read on Twitter or something, or it's just. And then what we had before was, and I don't know if we ever had this, but America should have always had this: consume and enjoy the things you enjoy, and then others will do the same. And if you don't wish to, never the twain shall meet. Like if you don't like a certain podcast, or if you don't like a certain voice in society, it is amazingly easy. Like back in 1968, if you didn't like Adam West, too bad. You had two other channels. You were going to watch Batman or two other things. Now it's like, if you don't like a certain podcast, or if you don't like what Ben Shapiro has to say, or if you don't like what Terry and I have to say, we're as avoidable as the bubonic plague. It's not hard to not see us.
Zach, let me tell you something though. Here's one of the things that I found in 2020. Well, really, it has been since, it's been for a while now, just to be honest with you. A lot of people find entertainment in being outraged, and being pissed off. And, some people will just like tune in. Like from time to time, I know you saw it. There's been a couple of times we started this show and we get a random, listener from, I don't know who it is or where they come from, but they'll chime in on our message board and say something like, "You guys suck," or "You guys are moron," like whatever it might be, and then sometimes they just fill up the entire message board with nonsense. And some people love that, like they are entertained by that, and it's the weirdest thing to me. Like, but I mean, so is dressing up in a leather suit and getting your butt whipped by a dominatrix. It's kind of odd to me too, but some people like it. Now
I'm feeling personally attacked.
I'm sorry, Zach. I knew you had that in your repertoire.
I like to be in a leather suit and get butt whipped while watching Tucker Carlson. That's my kink. And don't you dare kink shame me.
Oh Lord, man.
I'm complicated.
You are complicated. So before we get out of here, man, to round it all the way back to our original complicated person, which was Tiger Woods. He was obviously in a very horrific car crash today. You had to have the jaws of life to extricate him from the car. Mm-hmm. Where do we go from here with Tiger? So we're going to assume he's going to survive. He has surgery on his legs, both of which were broken. He has a shattered ankle, some other mild injuries. But where do we go from here with Tiger Woods' legacy? As you alluded to earlier in the show, he's tied with Nicholas, right? He's tied with Nicholas.
He's tied. Okay.
Actually, is he tied or is he one behind? I think he's one behind, and he's tied with Sam Snead for the total number of wins. Total number of wins, and one behind Nicholas with the Green Jackets. Where do we go? Where is Tiger Woods' legacy? Where does he go from here? The complicated man that he is.
You want to hear a dark answer?
I don't know if I do. Of course I do.
Shut off your laptop whenever. I would be curious, how deformed could he make his body and still pick up 12 eights in one night? Just by
honestly, it wouldn't be hard.
I feel like he could have an eyeball dangling out of his head, but missing a leg, barely able to speak 3 or 4 words. But if he's got that red shirt with the Nike logo on and is like, "I'm Tiger Woods," he is still pulling trim. And that would be his legacy.
You want a Tiger?
So,
you might want to come back to my hotel. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do.
Yeah, right. They have to get. Yes, they both have to get loaded into a van. Yeah.
No, I have my own thoughts about that.
I think that no matter what, Tiger, because he's just one of those one-name celebrities. And the only reason I ever watched golf in my entire life was because of Tiger Woods. And the only reason I'll ever watch golf again. So when he recovers from whatever he recovers from and is in the final round within striking distance of the championship, that's the only time I will watch golf, and I will be rooting for Tiger Woods.
Yeah. I feel pretty similarly, except for one thing. I don't think Tiger's coming back.
Yeah.
I don't think he's coming back. I think the next Woods we see that's going to be on that level will probably be his son. We've got probably 12 years. You think about Tiger Woods, the way that he plays the game. He brought a physicalness. That's the word, right? A physicality.
Physicality.
He brought a physicality to the game of golf that really wasn't there before. Like, saw the way he trained and put his body through so many things in order to hit that ball the way he did. That was some of his magic, right? He's had 5 surgeries on his back alone. He's had ACL surgery. He's had a broken leg, and he's 45 years old.
And 3 were golf related. The other 2 were other things.
Yeah, other things. But to come back from 5 surgeries alone, he was just now coming back from another surgery that he just had recently. So at 45, I mean, I know you can play golf for a long time, but the way that his game has been affected, I don't know if he ever bounces back to become the Tiger that
and I feel like the lesson is, after a while, stop working out. I mean, Phil Mickelson eats mozzarella sticks on the 7th hole green. He's still competitive.
Guy I'm thinking of, what's his name?
John Daly.
John Daly.
Yes.
Like it's a 6-pack on like the first 8. His first 8 on 6-pack.
Yeah, and that's his whole bit. He's still golfing. He's never had a surgery. And he obviously doesn't have the greatness, but after a while, Tiger, maybe the lesson might be like, after a certain age, you should just let yourself go. Don't be in peak physical condition. But
would you be
what do I know?
Tiger Woods out there with the his red Nike shirt tucked in and just a gut hanging over his belt, like a skinny body, gut hanging over the belt, out there trying to golf?
Don't think it matters. Still love to see it.
Odd to you? Like, I'm used to seeing this long, lean, linear Tiger Woods out there snapping the ball, and you see him just like.
Because here's what I'd love to see. They're still going to cut to him, even if he's at a plus 36. They're going to cut away from the leader and see how Tiger's doing. I mean, as long as he can drag his body onto a course.
Yeah. Did you see that drive by Tiger Woods? Oh my God.
Oh my gosh, 120 yards, but rather somewhat straight, but still it was Tiger.
Yeah, he is definitely, as complex and all that he is. He's a transformative figure, and he's somebody that's going to be, like, he's one of the one-namers, like you said, Madonna, Michael, Tiger, Kobe. Yeah, he's in that same category, man. So
yeah, without a doubt.
I hope he bounces back.
Yeah, I do too. Because I know whether they admit it or not, every golf fan likes golf at least 20% more when Tiger's in the race.
And golf likes him.
Obviously. Yeah.
Golf likes him.
Golf loves him. All right, dude. Well, thanks for this messy conversation.
Yeah.
I hope we both came out better for it.
Less messy.
We'll have another one on Thursday.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it.
See you, buddy. Patreon.com/Burns and Holla. Share this if you would. We had a good amount of people share it tonight, and we really appreciate it. Do it again tonight if you haven't already, and next Thursday for sure. See you, buddy.
See you guys.